Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is a show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story, plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. Today, on the 6th of April, 2019, I just needed a palate cleanser, so we are starting the second story of the fourth series of the Fourth Doctor Adventures, The Darkness of Glass, written, oddly enough, by Justin Richards, who wrote The Renaissance Man, which was quite good. I don't think he's written anything else for the Fourth Doctor Adventures. I could be wrong on that. I don't quite remember. But The Darkness of Glass starts out very promising. Now, it's not quite going for a straight horror, even though the cover art, which is gorgeous cover art, with the nice purple lantern glowing in the Doctor and Leela, flanking its really nice composition of cover art. We're not going for actually some straight horror. We're going for more historical mysticism, playing off lanternists, which were sort of, I guess, proto-magicians. They used smoke, mirrors, and lanterns to sort of create big illusions and things like that, which I think is actually quite an interesting idea for, a story. It's a fun story, and putting the Doctor and Leela in this situation makes it all the more interesting because of just how Leela would react to something so almost quote-unquote primitive, and a lot of this first episode is slow-moving, but unlike the Exelons before it, we actually feel like things are getting done with the episode. Like, by the end of the episode, we have had enough exposition base. We've had enough exposition, so one, we can get the feeling that Leela and the Doctor understand the situation. It also sort of builds mysticism about this Caversham society. Like, the plot involves the Doctor and Leela arriving in Britain in 1907 on a rainy day where they essentially get caught up in the rain at this house where, like, a meeting of the Caversham society is being... Henry Caversham was this lanternist figure, the only one not proven to be a fraud in his lifetime. Sort of a nice, which is already, it's a nice building of a sort of legend, like a legendary character, around this character, which is incredibly important because as a character, we don't actually see Henry Caversham. We just sort of see a lot of we see his his descendants. We see his we see some people who live around him, but we don't actually see him, the character. I think that's actually really important because the what's interesting is that the idea is that he summoned a demon with his quote-unquote magic and ended up battling with it and committing suicide to stop it from escaping. It's this very dark stories that Justin Richards slips in here, and it's really well executed because it's sort of like, oh, we're going along sort of standard Doctor Who fare, and then suddenly we just get this dark, like, suicide type thing where it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. That was not where anyone I could really guess that this story was going, that we were going to hit on a dark topic such as the suicide of a random person. And a lot of it is building around the atmosphere of this mysticism, and it's fairly enjoyable. It's really, really enjoyable as a story. It's playing around with some very good ideas, and those ideas are just very well executed by Justin Richards. What's nice is that the guest cast is good. Julia Wadham, famous for playing Steed, John Steed in the Big Finish version of the spy show The Avengers, appears in this episode as sort of one of the main sort of driving forces behind the plot, and he plays the role excellently. He's a fun character who really gets a good chance to show off, just to shine and show that he's very much a trying to live through this legacy that his ancestor had. But it's also, he's sort of like very scientific about it. He understands that something happened, but he doesn't quite know what, and he wants to find out what. It's the inquiring mind, yet not actually being like he tried to, he tried to have, something horrible happen. No, he's very much rational in his thought process about the world around him. It is an excellent, it's an excellent opener. Again, there's some issues. Again, the cliffhanger is kind of weird. It doesn't quite, you can't really understand where the cliffhanger's going and why the cliffhanger does what it does. It plays around with things very weirdly. So there are points where Tom Baker actually feels kind of off early on. It feels like he almost has a cold or is just getting over a cold. So he doesn't quite sound right as the Doctor here. He just sort of sounds like he's not phoning it in. He's trying his hardest, but it just doesn't, the energy isn't quite there because it feels like he has a cold. So that being said, The Darkness of Glass starts off as a pretty fun story. It's not perfect, but it's, good. Definitely a good palate cleanser after the Exelons. So I'm going to give The Darkness of Glass Part 1 an 8 out of 10. It is the 7th of April, 2019, and I just finished listening to Part 2 of The Darkness of Glass, the second episode and the concluding part of the story. Now, where the first part took a lot of its time to get going, to great effect, at least in my opinion, on the narrative, Part 2, oddly enough, only takes as much time as it needs to satisfactorily wrap things up. The cliffhanger, of course, was that this sort of shadow demon attacks, and then it's your standard monster reveal. But a lot of the second episode is sort of deconstructing what the demon is without actually deconstructing what the demon is. We don't actually get an explanation of what sort of an alien it is. We know it's alien, obviously, because this is Doctor Who, and Doctor Who just doesn't deal with, mystical threats and the like. But Justin Richards makes the wise decision to leave the actual identity of, what the alien is, what it's sort of causing, and what its goals are, to be completely unknown. Obviously, it wants to sort of take over the world. It's described as a demon made of shadow, that sort of, it's part of it also might just exist on just sort of as a creature of just pure light, and pure energy, because simply put, the shadow itself cannot, it seems to be only able to exist, it seems to be able to be trapped in a stained glass window, and then when that stained glass window is covered up with black paint, then it will be trapped. That is how Henry Caversham trapped it. Now, Henry Caversham was a lanternist. Now, a lot of this episode, even though it's only 22 minutes long, there's a lot of tension built, as, our present-day lanternist, played by Julian Wadham, gets, slowly goes through his slides, but they're not his slides, they're these nice, these blank things, and it turns out, the guy hosts that, the professor who has sort of been hosting the party, was trying to summon the demon to sort of take control of its power. He's a power-mad villain, in one of those, a very predictable Doctor Who twist, sort of using some people against them. It's a very standard Doctor Who trope, and it's something that, Doctor Who is not a stranger to, exploring this type of trope. And, it works actually pretty well overall. The trope is nicely executed. The acting, of course, is, as usual, is nice. And, we have enough time spent with the characters that, we really do feel. We can really feel who they are as people, and just sort of what their goals are, what they really want out of the world, and things like that. That being said, the episode is only 22 minutes, and this is an episode that doesn't suffer from not needing more time, and and doesn't suffer from being overly long. Justin Richards knows how to wisely use his time, which is something that I find fascinating. But there's just because we had part 1, which was a bit longer, clocking at about 28 minutes. So you sort of have this nice flexible length, so you don't quite have to worry about perhaps curtailing your story because you don't have the time to tell it in. There's plenty of time here to give us a good story, give us a solid conclusion, go through the entire story beats one by one. But also, The Darkness of Glass does some... the title itself really works well to, sort of paint on the major theme of the story, and the big twist that it's going to be it's the darkness of glass that traps the creature, but it could also be described as the darkness in the glass. It's a title that can have quite a bit of meanings and quite a bit of tangential relation to the story itself, and something that you really only get here in part 2. Something that Justin Richards, I think, just does well is creating a nice title, and it's intriguing. Also, Tom Baker and Louise Jameson are on perfect form here. They both, are really hitting every beat. Leela gets to play the character who sort of realizes that once Wadham's character starts playing his slides, Leela's working as his assistant, pressing the button on the projector to, make the projector slides go. She starts to realize that, what's this whispering? There's this random whispering that just sort of gets louder, and it's played off. And oddly enough, it's very subtle in the sound design, so it's really more of Louise Jameson selling it. And she does an excellent job sort of building that tension and just building that fear that something's not quite right with this whole projectionist show type thing. Something most definitely is off here. And there's probably more to this story than everyone could know. And of course, Justin Richards also uses the setting really well, that we're in a big castle, so there's obviously secret passages. And there's this point where the Doctor realizes that in telling Leela to barricade herself in with the other people for what he thought is protection, he may have accidentally put her life in danger. There's just a bunch of these really nice moments here, with the characters who do give quite a lot of dedication to telling the story and making the story interesting and making the story almost fun, and giving it breathing some real life into this into a really interesting plot. I will say the episode isn't perfect. Julian Wadham's character, a lot of the side characters aren't necessarily as memorable because they're a bit stereotypy. And the way the villain is actually defeated, while clever, kind of feels like then feels like it, could have been explained a little better in the dialogue, because Justin Richards really works with functional dialogue, and with the occasional wit. It's something that I think Richards does interestingly. So yes, but there's still quite a lot to enjoy here. So overall, I'm going to give The Darkness of Glass Part 2 another 8 out of 10. That being said, we add up the two scores to give The Darkness of Glass a final score of 8 out of 10. Thank everybody for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I always love to hear feedback. And join me next time we take a look at the third story in what is known as the REQUEM trilogy. And the first story in a two-part story known as Requiem for the Rocket Men.